What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Pat Outdoors. Today we're going to be starting a new project with my 2006 Yamaha YZ250. In case you don't follow my channel, I like to do a lot of modifications to dirt bikes and little electric bikes such as these two Razer MX650s. This blue one actually runs on 72 volts and goes 50 miles an hour. So I've always been curious what it would be like to do something similar, but at a much larger scale. So that's exactly what we're doing with this bike. This bike actually runs just fine the way it is right now, though I took it out to some trails a couple weeks ago and noticed the exhaust smokes quite a bit more than your typical two-stroke. But instead of rebuilding this tired motor, I've decided I'm going to pull everything out and take this opportunity to build something really unique. So today I want to start by stripping this bike down to bare frame, and then we'll go over all the components we're planning on using for this project. Here's everything that we've taken off of the bike so far. Got all the plastics, bar pad, airbox assembly, rear subframe, exhaust silencer, and the seat. Up next, I'm gonna start working on draining the fuel from the fuel tank. Take the tank off. Then we're gonna take off this FMF header pipe, which I believe is just held on by these two tensioner springs and an 8mm bolt for the bracket. And hopefully it'll wiggle off easily. Looks like it's been there for a couple of years, so we'll see. And then I want to take off the CDI components, the computer, the harness. I want to get as close as I can to being ready to take the motor off by the end of today. Here are the rest of the parts that we just removed from the bike. I'm excited to get this IMS high capacity 3.4 gallon fuel tank taken off the bike, since it made it pretty top heavy. Since when that was fully filled, it weighed almost 24 pounds. And then the FMF gnarly header pipe actually came off pretty easily. Wasn't rusted or anything. Forgot to mention there was a second bracket at the bottom, just a 10mm bolt. And this bike's definitely had a rough life. If you look at this is the left radiator. It's pretty banged up. Looks like a stick pierced through the grill, and I'm surprised that wasn't leaking. The left radiator or right radiator had some bent brackets on the outside. So it's had a rough life, but I'm glad that we're converting it to electric, so none of these parts have to go back on. These were also filled with fluid, so we should be saving a lot of weight. Before we continue with the teardown, I just want to quickly go over the kit that I'm planning on using for this project. This is the newest QS138 kit offered by Electro Co. With the 25 kilowatt controller and no battery, it costs $1549. It comes with almost everything that I need. The motor housing has a built-in bracket and gear reduction that's designed specifically to be fitted on a dirt bike. If you do have other options that you'd like to recommend, please comment below and I'll look further into it. So here's how we're looking so far. Got the bike all stripped down, so I'm pretty much ready to start working on taking out the engine and the gearbox, along with the skid plate and a couple more accessories, so we can get the chassis deep cleaned before we start doing a reassembly. My whole purpose with this bike is to have something for my wife to ride that she doesn't have to worry about clutching, shifting, or kick-starting over and over again whenever she stalls. But I still want a full-size dirt bike that's even more capable than my KLX and hopefully faster than my KLX. I also want something that I can rip around the neighborhood without attracting all the Karens, since it should be a lot quieter than having a two-stroke. Since this is an older bike, this YZ is a 2006, I'm gonna hit all the hardware with some PB Blast. Hopefully that'll make it easier to break loose. I might actually have to cut off some of the hardware for the skid plate since it's pretty banged up. This one I definitely can't even get a wrench on, so I might have to cut that off. The last thing I'm going to take off is the through bolt that goes through the swing arm. That's the last bolt I'll need to take off to take the engine out. I'm going to save that for when I get this thing on a stand a little later. Here's how we're looking so far. Got all the motor mount hardware removed. The motor's just sitting there, held in place by the swing arm bolt. The skid plate, I had to cut off 2 of the bolts holding it in place since they were pretty mangled, and probably 2 or 3 pounds of mud caked in there. So this thing's about to lose some weight just from cleaning. Now I'm gonna work on taking out the ignition, the wiring, and any remaining cables that are attached to the engine. Then we're gonna get the bike on a stand, unbolt the swing arm, and take this thing out. I got the rest of the fueling and ignition components taken off. Check out how clean that carb is. Bike's now supported by the stand. In theory, I should be able to remove the sprocket from the gearbox and let the chain hang. Pull the swing arm bolt out and be able to pull the whole engine out. I didn't disconnect the clutch cable though, so I'm gonna pull out the engine with the lever. All right guys, there it is. Finally got the 2-stroke out. That was honestly a little easier than I thought it would be. This is my first time ever pulling out an engine from a dirt bike or a motorcycle in general. I'm used to cars where it'll take me all day to pull a motor out. I have to get a cherry picker, but I was able to do this pretty much all by myself and lift it out by hand. It's probably like 50 or 60 pounds. And then I just reinserted this swing arm bolt to hold everything in place. And check out all that crud in there. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna soak this in degreaser so I can load it up into my Pathfinder tomorrow and take it to a power washing place so we can get all this dirt out. Let me know what you guys think I should do to this chassis. Should I just polish it up with some Scotch-Brite, make it like bare aluminum finish, or should I get it powder coated? Should I paint it? Let me know. So I don't actually have a place to wash this bike myself since I'm in a apartment garage, as you see. So I'm gonna take this to a self car wash and I'm gonna pressure wash it right on the rack. I think that'll be the easiest. All right guys, I just want to quickly go over the motor and controller setup that I decided to go with. I reached out to Electro Co to inquire about their QS138 V3 kit. I've been looking at that kit for a while now because it comes complete, it's plug and play, and I like the customer support and communication from Electro Co. Kevin and Stephanie are pretty quick to answer any questions I have about their product. So yes, I probably could have gotten it a little cheaper piecing out a generic QS138 kit from AliExpress or Alibaba, but I like the idea of having customer support in case I have any issues or I have any questions in the future. I think I got the kit for like $13.50 shipped. I went with the EM-200 controller, and after speaking with Kevin, he recommended that I just skip the DKD display and just get the voltmeter if I have a dirt bike, since it doesn't really have too many functions besides displaying like speed. There's not like a bunch of settings or modes that I can toggle through or anything like that. So that is why I went with Electro Co. Just gonna spray the whole bike with this degreaser and let it soak for a few minutes while we wait in line for these folks to finish. Thing is looking clean. This is definitely the cleanest it's ever been, though we do still have some work to do. Can only get so much done with a power washer, so we're gonna get down to polishing. So what we're gonna do now is work on getting this dull aluminum surface to a more polished and smooth, almost chrome-like finish. What some of y'all suggested is to use some Scotch-Brite along with some WD-40 and scuff up the whole frame till it's super clean, and then hit it with some mag polish by Mother's. But I don't have WD-40. I only have PB Blast in the garage for the meantime. So we're gonna try this out. Hopefully it has a similar effect. If not, we'll go out and get some WD-40. So here's how it looks after just one round of hand polishing. The surface is a lot smoother. You can see a clear reflection of my hand and my fingers. This is just one round of scrubbing it down with a Scotch-Brite and the PB Blaster and hitting it with some Mother's mag polish. It's just one round. I did another test spot over here just so you can see there's a big difference in the sheen. Instead of like this satin aluminum finish, this is just like 2 minutes of rubbing it down with some mag polish. For some reason, it didn't do too much with the swing arm. It got a little shinier, but this must be a different type of material. We're gonna keep trying. I also forgot I have an electric buffer, so we are gonna hit it with a buffer after the second round. Damn, check out that difference in that finish just from 2 rounds of that mag polish. That mother stuff definitely works its magic on this aluminum frame, and the buffer helped get it closer to that polished aluminum finish that I'm looking for. Though I'm still having an issue with the swing arm. I don't know if it's just got a different coating on it or whatever. This whole bike is definitely gonna take a lot of man labor. A lot of this stuff's going to the dumpster tonight, except for the seat and the skid plate. If you are going to do a Restyle kit or simply be replacing all your plastics, before you throw the old ones away, make sure you have all the hardware and inserts from all the little mounting points and set them aside for the new ones. I just want to show you guys what the subframe looks like before we spend some time on it. Now we're gonna scrub it down some more with a Scotch-Brite pad and some WD-40, and then we're gonna finish things off with some mag polish. Hopefully that'll give it a almost chrome-like polished aluminum finish. Look at the sheen on this thing. This is just from 20 minutes of scrubbing by hand. There's still some oxidation here and there and a couple deep scratches that I can't get out with a Scotch-Brite, but this thing is looking fresh. Like, look at the welds on that. It's pretty much at that polished aluminum finish that I was looking for. There's a few small spots that could use some touching up, but overall, this is looking really good just from scrubbing for 20 minutes. UPS just came by and dropped off a couple packages. Let's open these up and see what's inside. What's kind of crazy is I literally ordered all this stuff not even a full 48 hours ago while I was at Dirt Days. This plastic set is a 2019 YZ250 Restyle kit. The airbox comes in 4 pieces. You have to rivet it together. It comes with some instructions. I think I got the whole plastic set for not even $100 shipped. Then I'm gonna pair that with a satin black, nice fat bar. It's a 1 1/8 inch. It's gonna replace this older 7/8 inch beat up one. Then I'm gonna pair that with the Protaper oversized bar clamps and a bar pad. This thing's gonna look really sweet, all blacked out. I got all this stuff for not even $170. If you are interested in checking out any of the parts that I'm using for this project, I will leave a link in the description below where you can check it out. This looks so much nicer. The gloss black finish on the fork guards turned out pretty nice. Now it blends right in with all the other plastics. The tank, I refinished a satin black. I think it looks cleaner and more stealthy looking that way. It's gonna match the air box as well. It's looking pretty good so far. I didn't paint the inside of the tank since I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with this tank yet. It's oversized, so I'm thinking I could potentially fit the controller inside there. Still haven't gotten the Electro Co package, so we'll find out when that comes in. The fitment for all the plastics have been pretty decent so far until I got to the front number plate. I have it mocked up right now so the top hole lines up, but then when you look at the pre-drilled holes at the bottom, they're drilled slightly forward on the plate, so when I pull down on the number plate, it won't sit flush against the triple tree. So I might have to notch it over here so it sits flush, or I'll offset the holes back a little bit so I can get it to sit all the way flat. And the same thing applies to the front fender, though the instructions do warn you that you have to notch the holes for it anyway. You got to keep in mind that this fender is meant for a later model YZ, but it's pretty simple. All I have to do is re-drill these 4 holes so it'll match the bolt pattern on these 4. So I just made a mock-up template with a piece of cardboard paper, put it up against the bottom side of the triple tree, and I poked holes through it with the screwdriver. And then as you see, the bolt pattern is a little bit more narrow than the later model YZs. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna cut this down smaller, line it up so it's perfectly center on the surface, and I'm gonna drill it with a matching drill bit size. And I'm gonna go with a larger size, which is 2164. It happens to be the same exact size as the inserts that we're gonna plop in there. And here's how the front panels ended up looking. The number plate I ended up just notching on both sides, very minimally. I was able to bolt it down and get it seated flat. And then the front fender, you'll see the holes are just slightly offset from the original holes. And then I inserted the spacers. Here's what it looks like at the bottom. Nice and clean, nice and centered. Bike's looking pretty good. Just got a delivery from Electro Co, which should be the QS138 V3 kit that we ordered for the Yamaha YZ250 electric dirt bike conversion. Let's go open it up and see what's inside. Ooh, looks like they upgraded me. This is much bigger in person than it looks in pictures. Here's everything that came in the EMX 25 kilowatt kit, starting with the QS138 with a built-in gear reduction, Protaper grips, plug-and-play harness, throttle, voltmeter, and then power switch and mode selector. And then this is the EM-260 25 kilowatt Votol controller, which I decided I'm gonna put in the airbox instead of the fuel tank because it's simply too large to fit. So I'm gonna start by installing all the items that are supposed to go in the handlebar, and then I'm gonna route all the wiring harnesses to the airbox area so we can get it connected to the controller. So here's how we're looking so far. I decided to put the voltmeter and the switches on the left side since I have the brake master cylinder on this side, and it just looks a little bit more balanced that way. But I do have 3 sets of wires on the left side. And then unfortunately the big plug, which is for the power switch and mode selector, is significantly shorter than the other 2 harnesses. What I'm likely gonna do is have this connect under the tank and then have the rest run through the front side of the airbox. And here's how the wiring turned out. Nice and clean, both sides tucked in front of the triple tree and wrapped around the left side. And we're able to use the loop on the frame. It's got plenty of slack, doesn't get caught when I'm turning. And then I'm probably gonna have this whole harness above the left gas tank mount. When I have the battery in, I'll finalize everything. Just have it tied to the frame and then going into the front side of the airbox where the main plug is gonna connect to the controller. And then this one is for the Hall sensor wires for the motor. Now we're gonna work on mounting the motor and running the phase wires through this side, and then we'll create a cover for this side of the airbox. And as far as mounting the QS motor, I'm gonna be using these 2 bottom front brackets as the starting point. We're gonna set the motor on the frame, and then we'll line up those mounts with these 2 bottom tabs, thread on some bolts from both sides, and then slide the motor back and forth until we can get this sprocket lined up with where the chain should be. And then once we have the motor positioned where we want it, I'm gonna do some measurements and start fabricating the brackets. Here's how the motor sits where I want it. with the sprocket lined up perfectly with the chain guard. You'll see it's perfectly straight front to back. Here's what the sprocket looks like mounted from the side. So you'll notice the inside of the tabs, there's a gap between the bottom bracket and the tabs. It's a little over a 1/4 inch on this side and a little less than an inch on this side. I'm gonna be making some spacers to fill that gap. I'm gonna be using this tubing that I purchased from Amazon. This is just aluminum tube. Outside diameter is 17 millimeter and the inside diameter is 8 millimeter, which is perfect if you're using M8 by 1.25 bolts. Everything I use for this project, I will leave a link in the description below in case you wanna check it out. Here's how the hardware and spacers turned out on both sides. This side was 7/8 and this side I cut a 1/4 inch, but it actually needed just a tad more, so I added a washer here to get the motor centered and get the sprocket to line up. And I was digging around these parts that came off this bike and noticed these two triangular pieces. These are actually the original top motor mounts for the 2-stroke motor. And I was staring at this, and the distance between this bigger hole and the smaller hole appears to be very similar to the swing arm bolt and the rear motor mount. So it looks like I could cut these tabs off, both of them, and then mount them in there, bolt it to the rear motor mount, and slip the swing arm bolt through. But then I measured the inner diameter and it's 20 millimeters. And the shaft diameter is 18 millimeter. It's an M18 bolt. So I didn't want it to be loose or jiggle around when I'm accelerating. So I found this pipe from Amazon as well. This is 18 millimeters inner diameter and 20 millimeters outer diameter, which happens to be almost a press fit for these brackets. So what I'm planning on doing here is cutting a section of this pipe to fit nice and snug in the center of the swing arm, and then slide the 2 brackets in place to use as a rear motor mount. So the tube fits nice and snug in the center of the swing arm, but unfortunately the 2 plates make contact with the inner edges when I have them bolted to the motor mount. So we have to find a different solution. What I've decided to do is have the plates bolted to the bottom motor mounts, and then I'm gonna have them welded directly on the frame. I'm gonna have my buddy Justin do it since I don't know how to weld aluminum. This way we can have peace of mind when we're twisting the throttle. This motor is not going anywhere. The range is on the battery. It depends on the controller output. Probably like 25 full-power. And here's how the welds turned out on the tabs. It penetrated pretty well once he turned up the heat on the machine a little bit more. This is certainly going to be a lot more reliable than any bolt-on solution. So I know my QS motor is not going to go anywhere when I twist the throttle. Now I'm going to work on cleaning this up a little bit more, and then we're going to put the QS138 back in and start working on the controller. I can't believe I was able to fit the EM-260 controller sideways on the airbox. It's definitely a snug fit. Took a lot of finagling. I had to unbolt the top of the subframe and unbolt the airbox and squeeze it in there. But it's a nice and snug fit, about a 1/4 inch side to side play, about 1 inch back and forth. I'm planning on putting some padding on the bottom side and then tying it on the top 2 corners. And then I'm gonna make a cover for the opening of the airbox and run the wiring through the top side. Now this was a very snug fit. I was able to wrap the controller in 1/2 inch dense foam at the bottom and on all sides. Now I can have peace of mind that the controller is well protected and it's not going to be moving around when we're riding on trails. The foam also helps absorb any vibrations to keep the controller well protected. Here's how the wiring looks up close. Everything's all hooked up except for the signal wire and the 2 wires going to the battery. And everything fit inside the airbox just fine. Though, just to give you a heads up, these orange phase wires are very tough to bend and maneuver. So keep that in mind if you are planning on installing your controller in a tight spot like this. And here's how I have the other wiring routed, going to the front side of the airbox. Now I'm just gonna reinstall all the plastics on the back side and make that cover for the front side of the airbox. Here's a closer look at the ABS plastic cover that I made for the front side of the airbox. I just made a little outlet cutout for the wiring to go through. You can see the foam here at the bottom, still keeping it pretty sealed. I just left enough room for the 2 power wires to come from the battery. Here's what it looks like from the inside. The inside is a shiny part I don't really care for. The outside is a nice, sleek, textured plastic. And then I just secured it to the airbox with 1 self-tapper. Here's how we're looking so far. So this bike is essentially fully finished with the exception of having a battery installed. I just got these 2 big boxes delivered by FedEx, and I'm assuming that these are the 2 batteries that I ordered from Amorge, one for the YZ and the other one's for the TTR project. Let's go open up the bigger box and see if we can get this bike running today. That is well protected. Connector for the controller side. I like that it says my name on it. Patrick Caslag, 72 volt, 40 amp hour. Stacked with foam, which is probably good because FedEx kind of sucks with this type of stuff. That is nice. That is so much nicer than the BTR pack that I used for my Razor. Sealed on both sides. Here's the port for the charger and for the discharge, which connects to the connector that's provided for the controller. So it doesn't come with a charger. Let me know if you guys have a charger you want to recommend. I was hoping to get like a 12 amp charger or something a little bit faster. According to Alan, this 40 amp hour battery is rated for 350 amp peak discharge and then 240 continuous, which is plenty for what we're using the YZ for. And as far as dimensions, the 40 amp hour battery is 9.75 by 8.75 by 6.25. And then the 40 amp hour comes with 6 gauge wiring. Same thing for the connector for the controller. Those are QS138 connectors. And then the charge port is a XT60. Both of these batteries were custom made for the specs that I ordered. You'll notice they both have a production date of May 14, 2023 per my order. And then the bigger battery has this extra sticker instructing you to download a Android or iOS app. That's because it actually has a ANT BMS that you can download an app and connect to it if you want to monitor it for diagnostic reasons. Now let's work on getting this battery mounted on top of the motor. Man, this battery seems like it belongs there. Almost seems too perfect as far as width, overall height, and length. So now I'm gonna work on building a battery tray out of this angle aluminum, which will bolt onto the frame and the top motor mount. So I just used some JB Weld steel stick to temporarily secure all 4 corners to each other while they're positioned nice and snug against the battery. Then we're gonna let this cure for a little while, then pull the battery out and then drill all 4 corners and then properly secure it in place with some 3/16 rivets. And here's how the top portion of the tray turned out. It's very solid, very secure. And then this is how I was thinking about mounting it, just hovering right above the motor. I gotta make some tabs for the frame and the top motor mount. And then we're gonna attach it to the bottom side of this. I'm gonna cut out a section of the foam just to put on the bottom side of the tray to absorb any sort of vibrations on the trails, help protect the battery. Before we continue, I just want to say shout out to my buddy David Schiffy for letting me use his Hercules drill bit set. He knows I don't have a proper drill and I'm actually just using my impact driver. These cool drill bits have the proper attachment that's compatible at the bottom. Thank you for letting me use this because I wouldn't not have been able to complete this project without you. And here's how the battery tray looks up close. Very sturdy. What it looks like at the bottom. Considering I'm not a fabricator, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. So it was definitely a much tighter fit than anticipated with the battery tray installed. It was physically impossible to slide the battery in there without notching the bottom side of this mount on the inside of the frame and also cutting off a section of the right side of the battery tray. But this battery is not going anywhere. There's no movement whatsoever. But I'm gonna add a strap to this just for additional security. I probably could have gotten away with getting a 1/2 inch more clearance on the backside if I rotated the battery counterclockwise, like 90 degrees, but I didn't want to risk having the cables protruding to the side, either on the right side or the left side, and get caught on anything on the trails. I really prefer it be tucked on the back side of the frame like this. Since the Amorge 72-volt battery pack we ordered didn't come with a charger, I'm temporarily using the 5 amp charger that came with my BTR pack that I'm using on my 72-volt Razor. I just made an adapter to connect it to XT60. Here's what the adapter looks like up close. This side is just a charge port that came with one of my BTR chargers. And then this side is the XT60 male plug. I just got a multi-pack from Amazon for like 10 bucks. And then I just added a little bit of shrink tubing in between to make it look a little cleaner. I had the charger hooked up to it overnight since the battery pack started at 71 volts when we first got it in. Hopefully it's in the 80s now. It's holding 85.3 volts, so the battery is fully charged. Now we just got to connect the bigger cables from the battery to the power source and ground post on the controller using this QS8 adapter that came with the battery. This just didn't come pre-wired with connectors, so we crimped on a pair of these 6-gauge brass terminals and then covered it up with some heat shrink to clean it up. I just got a multi-pack of terminals from Amazon for like 10 bucks since I do a lot of these type of projects. If you are interested in checking out any of the items that we're using for this project, I will have everything linked in the description below. Before we connect the power plug and turn the bike on for some testing, I want to address something with the rear brake pedal. There used to be a tensioner spring that looped onto this tab on the back side of the pedal that connected to the frame, but it was making contact with the side of the QS motor, so we had to leave that out. And this tab is also still touching, which it's not limiting the range of motion. I just don't like the idea of that making contact with this every time I step on the rear brake. So I'm gonna cut that old tab off, and then I'm gonna add a tensioner spring upgrade on the master cylinder side to give the pedal a nice, firm, modular feeling. And here's what that looks like up close. What's nice about this one is you can adjust how tight or how loose you want the tension to be. I like my brake pedal feeling pretty firm, so I have it on the tightest setting. I'm a little nervous about testing it because I don't know if this is like my other brushless motors where when you connect the power, it'll just like, when you turn it on, it'll automatically spin the wheel. And there's no clutch anymore. So I'm afraid that if I connect this, my bike's just gonna shoot through the wall. Yeah. So I kind of needed your help to put it on the, the stand. You ready? Okay. 83.4. Two modes. I don't know what mode does what. Ooh. Just took the bike out for a quick test ride around the block just to confirm all the electronics and the front and rear brakes are functioning properly. Also wanted to confirm that the chain is properly aligned and tensioned. This is definitely going to be the fastest bike I own. I haven't even passed half throttle, and it is more than enough torque that I'm looking for. We weren't able to install the tank though because the bottom side of it has to be trimmed in order to properly clear the battery. So I'm going to do that now. I cannot even express how happy I am to see this beautiful thing back together. I'm not even gonna wait. Let's go take this thing out right now. Definitely learned my lesson last time with the 72-volt Razor. When I first installed that new Kelly controller, I looped the shit out of it, so definitely putting boots on at least. I don't care how silly I look wearing basketball shorts around the neighborhood with some boots on, but I am not injuring my ankle again. Kind of want to do a quick shakedown and make sure nothing's loose, and make sure everything works. But it looks good with all the stuff on it. All the black plastics. That's crazy. Yeah, it's 30% throttle. I think it looks. goes 57. Bucket. Average max speed 58.8 miles an hour. That's definitely exceeded the build goals for sure. All right, well, I was not expecting that. This bike goes 58.8 miles an hour on the medium setting, so I have no doubt it could have hit 60 if I tucked and let it wind out for another 20 or 30 yards, but I'm curious to see how fast it'll go on the torquier setting, which is setting 2. I don't know if that's actually more powerful or if it's just a different throttle curve. We'll find out sometime soon. So with a 15-tooth sprocket, this thing has no problem climbing hills and whatnot and still being able to go on the street and hitting 60 miles an hour. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you like this kind of content, want to see more of the Project YZ or the TTR QS138 conversion or any of my other projects, consider subscribing to this channel. But this is going to be it for today. Thank you for watching.